Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I am doing my February wrap-up. So this month I read a lot of books, like more than I normally do, for two reasons. First, my Goodreads group hosted our first readathon, and it was a 72-hour readathon, and within those days I managed to read 9 or 10 books. I think it was 9. So right after that, my younger brother challenged me to a reading competition, which was his mistake. So we each had to read 10 books that the other person picked out, and right off the bat that was like 19 books I read this month, and then I read a few others, so I think in total I read 21 books this month. Also, just as a warning, normally when I do my monthly wrap-ups, I will post links to all of the book reviews I did for these books on my blog, and unfortunately I didn't really get to a whole lot this month because I was so busy reading, and when I wasn't reading I was doing school stuff, so a lot of those reviews for the books that I read last month are probably going to come out this month. Okay, so let's get started. So the first book I read this month was Chasing Power by Sarah Beth Durst. I did not like this book very much. I ended up only giving it 1 star. Ultimately, I just found this book to be kind of cliche, really awful, horrific romance that was just the worst. And while there were some aspects that were kind of cool, it was just not well executed and it was really kind of boring. It sounded like it would be a really exciting book, but it ultimately was very boring. The next book that I read was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I got this book from Book Outlet and I've heard a lot about it. People have been talking about it like crazy, I feel like. So I read it and it was good. It was not amazing or fantastic, but it was good. For me, kind of the problem was that I didn't understand certain things in the book. I had to keep going back and rereading, trying to like make sense of the society, and normally I don't have trouble with that, so I'm not sure if it was just me or if it was the book, but the story itself was really interesting. I really liked that, and I will definitely be picking up the second book. It just took me a little bit to kind of trudge through this one, and that doesn't mean it's bad. I'm thinking about rereading it sometime in the future if I ever have time to reread, because I feel like now that I kind of understand better where the story's going and some of the aspects of society that get explained later, the beginning might be easier for me. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Wicked by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have kind of been on a Jennifer L. Armentrout marathon lately. I just discovered her, I think last month or something. I obviously had heard of her before, but I hadn't read any of her books. And I read this one, and it was definitely more of an adult book, which I was not expecting because people kept talking about it and saying it was like Shadowhunters and City of Bones and things like that. So I was like, oh, young adult. And then there was some banging, and I was like, okay, this is not young adult. And I don't mind stuff like that. I read adult books all the time, and I am an adult, so it doesn't matter, but that definitely kind of caught me off guard. However, I actually really loved this book. I thought it was so much fun, the characters were interesting and badass, and I loved the steamy, swoony romance. So I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was A Cold Legacy by Megan Shepherd. This is the final book in the Madman's Daughter trilogy, and I was super excited for this one. It came out last month. I really love the other 2 books in the series. I've talked about them a few times. I really like them, and this book was a very big disappointment. I have a video where I did a discussion about it and a review for it, so I'm not really going to talk much about it. I'll link those below if you want to check them out, but this was, it was so disappointing, you guys. So I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. The next 2 books that I read were Onyx and Obsidian by Jennifer L. Armentrout. They are both in this one book because I bought it from Book Outlet, and I had mixed feelings about these. I have heard so much about this series and how amazing it is and how much everybody loves Damon and everything, so I was so excited to start it, and I really had high hopes. I actually did not like this book that much. The first one was definitely worse than the second one. The thing that really surprisingly ruined it for me was I did not like Damon. I did not like him one bit. I thought that he was an asshole. I really think that there's kind of a fine line between like being arrogant and kind of like douchey, but still having charm and not outright being like a jerk. And Damon kind of crossed that line most of the time. I felt like he was really just kind of cruel and a big fat jerk, and I didn't like him. In the second book, Obsidian, he got a little bit better. So I gave the first one 2 stars, the second one 3 stars, and I have the next 2 on my shelf. And I'm sure I will read them sometime, but they're not really on my priority list because I didn't like these ones so much. And then the next 2 books I read were, I can't even remember the title. Oh, Born at Midnight and Awake at Dawn by C.C. Hunter. This is another book I got from Book Outlet, so it's the first 2 jam-packed together in one. And I despised these books, really. And I am so surprised because on Goodreads these books get like 4.2 out of 5 ratings. Like all of them are like in the middle 4 ratings. And they are atrocious. I do not understand how anybody likes these. They are so awful, you guys. I just couldn't even believe it. I don't even know why I read the second one. Obviously, I'm a masochist or something because it was just painful to read. I gave these books, both of them, 1 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Something Strange and Deadly by Susan Dennard. I got this book from Book Outlet, and I'd been meaning to read it for a while because I've been reading the Starkiller cycle that her and Sarah J. Maas are doing online together, and I really love it. So I love Sarah J. Maas's books, so I thought I would give Susan Dennard's a try. And I was a little bit disappointed. This was not as good as I had hoped. I really was excited because it's steampunk, it's zombies, you know, those are both really cool, awesome things. But really, I found this book to be kind of like juvenile. It just didn't really appeal to me. I only gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. And then after that, I read the sequel, A Darkness Strange and Lovely by Susan Dennard as well. And this one I liked a little bit better than the first, but again, I just felt like there was something missing. I feel like I could potentially really love these books. I really like the time era. I, again, really love steampunk. I really love zombies. It could be a really cool mix. I just didn't like these that much, so I also gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I'm not sure if I will be reading the last one. The next book I read, and I finally got to it and I was so excited, was The Archive by Victoria Schwab. I picked this up a couple months ago and only read like the first 3 pages and then put it down and picked something else up. I don't know why. I just didn't feel in the mood to read it. So I picked it up this month again and I loved it. This book was so good, you guys. And I know this is kind of old news because this book came out a little bit ago, but holy cow! How fantastic. Really, this was my first time reading a Victoria Schwab book, and it was amazing. I gave this book a full 5 out of 5 stars, and it was just so good. The next book that I read this month was The Burning Sky by Sherry Thomas. I got this from Book Outlet again, and it sounded really good. And ultimately, I ended up enjoying it, actually. It was kind of strange. It wasn't really what I expected, but in a good way. And one of the main reasons that I really love this book was because the main boy, who is a prince and the love interest, was really a fantastic character. He was really interesting. He had a very defined character. He was a really strong person. And I really loved how different he was from a lot of like princes that we read about today. I feel like the prince stereotype is always kind of smug and arrogant and charming, but with a heart of gold underneath, and you know, whatever. And I expected that when I went into this, but he's really not, and I really enjoyed that. His character carried this book for me a lot, and the main girl is also equally fantastic, and I really enjoyed this book. The plot line was pretty engaging. It wasn't the most interesting thing in the world, but the characters were what kept me engaged, and I really enjoyed that. So I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. I love the Mistborn trilogy so much, and I got this one from Book Outlet, and I'd been meaning to read it for a little while, and I finally got to it, and it was so good. I'm sure absolutely nobody is surprised by that, but I love this book. It was so interesting. It was so good. It was really different from Mistborn because this is clearly aimed towards younger readers, young adult, and oh my gosh, it was fantastic. It was so just interesting. This whole world was really interesting in it. The Arithmetist, they do like duels with chalks. They draw like all these different intricate like circles and things with like barriers and protections, and they make like these little chalk creatures that fight, and it was so cool. I really liked it, and I'm super excited for the second one. I obviously gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was another one that I've been meaning to read for a while, and that is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I can't believe I finally picked this book up. I've been meaning to read it forever, and I just never really got around to it. So what I actually did was I watched the show as I read the book, and oh my god, it was amazing, you guys. I know everybody already knows this, and once again, I'm super behind everybody else, but this book was so good. I can't, the feels you guys I got from this book, I don't even know. I'm not going to talk about this one really because I think I'm going to do a discussion video about it because I have to. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. So next I went through and reread the entire Throne of Glass series, or at least what's out, by Sarah J. Maas. This was with my Goodreads book group. We decided to do a readathon for these this month, and it was so good. I'm not going to talk about these because I was just rereading them for fun, and they were so fantastic, and rereading Heir of Fire for the first time was... it was just heart-wrenching, you guys. I can't even talk about it. It hurts my soul. To the surprise of no one, all of these books get 5 out of 5 stars. After rereading the Throne of Glass series, I then picked up The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which I hadn't read yet and I got for Christmas as a present from my sister. So I sat down one night and read this whole book and cried a lot, and it was really good. It was so sad. I was really nervous that I was going to fall in love with Sam, and I'm a big, like, Kale girl, and I totally did fall in love with Sam. I don't think that I love him more than Kale, and, spoilers if you haven't read the series, since Sam dies, he's not really, like, competition right now, but it was so sad still, because through the whole book you knew it was coming, and watching them form a relationship, it just was heart-wrenching. It was so upsetting. This book got 5 out of 5 stars, and I loved it, not even just because of Sam, but really kind of seeing these journeys that Selena goes on to turn her into the person she is when we start Throne of Glass was just awesome. The next book that I read was This Shattered World by Amy Kaufman. I loved, like, really loved These Broken Stars. I read it a few months ago, so This Shattered World came out in December, I believe. And I just now got around to reading it, but holy moly, you guys, it was so beautiful. I love the way that they are written. They are beautiful books. And I really like this one, but I actually did not enjoy it as much as These Broken Stars. I just didn't like the characters as much. The story was just as amazing. And I really liked the whole, like, rebel war plotline was really interesting. I just loved Lilac and Tarver more from These Broken Stars, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Fire and Flood by Victoria Scott. This was another reread I did because I ordered Salt and Stone from the library and couldn't really remember Fire and Flood. I do remember that I gave it 1 out of 5 stars, and I think about it occasionally, laughing over the idiotic heroine that is Tella. So I decided to reread it just for fun and see if it was still as horrible as I remembered. Actually, in all honesty, I didn't hate it as much as I guess I initially did. It was still really bad, and I'm still leaving it at its 1 out of 5 stars, but it was not as awful as I originally believed it to be. I will be reading the sequel just because for some sick, twisted reason these books are horrendous, but I really have fun reading them, almost because they're so bad. And the last book I read this month, probably, almost undoubtedly, the best book I read this month was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Holy cow, you guys, this book was so good. I can't stop smiling. It was so fantastic. I don't even know where to begin. I surprisingly actually ordered it from the library and didn't expect to get it for a long time, and I got it like the next day, so thank you, library. That was the best thing ever. I sat down and I busted this book out in like 2 or 3 hours, and I cried and I laughed, and it was so good. So good, you guys. The best book I have read in a really long time. Definitely check it out if you have not. Okay, I feel like I just talked for like forever about all the books I read. That's the like downside to reading so many books, is I feel like my wrap-up videos are always so much longer than everybody else's. So thank you for sticking that out and watching this all the way to the end. Sorry that was so long. So those were all of the books that I read this month. Comment below and let me know if you guys have read any of those books and what you thought about them. Hopefully I will have most of my reviews up for the ones I'm doing reviews for sometime soon. Anyways, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.